Good afternoon, Tom. We're going to continue on with some of Jeffrey's questions, and he's referring to your My Big Toe book, which he's rereading for the second time, Book 1, Section 1, Chapter 14, page 104. Tom writes about the NPMR entities shutting him out of NPMR because they don't want him growing up weird. Tom writes, neither worker said anything, but they both looked far away into the distance. It was a long and intense look. Suddenly they both gave out a loud gasp, as if they were simultaneously surprised and shocked. Tom writes both workers now had the demeanor of someone who had inadvertently blundered into something they weren't supposed to know about. Glanced at each other with concern. Both were more than a little worried. They had a sense of impending personal jeopardy. Problem was, they now knew something they were not supposed to know. They stared at Tom with a quizzical amazement and slammed the door shut. The question is, what did they learn? Did you ever find this out? Just very curious, because we have PMR feelings going on here, concern, worry, and feelings of personal jeopardy. What was this experience for you? Is that something you can talk about?
Well, at the time, I had no idea what they were talking about. It was a mystery. I couldn't get any information out of them after that. So I just kind of forgot about it when all those memories came back. Now, I still, of course, don't know what they saw. So any part of my explanation of what it might be is just me making something up. So I don't know. But at the time that was happening, there was more of a conflict between the love side and the fear side. Okay. And the love side had its machinations going, things that it was trying to make happen, things it was doing, its own plans. And so did the fear side, had machinations that it was trying to work to further its own plans, which were mostly to create chaos. So there was a lot more bad blood between those two sides as there is now. Now, some of that still goes on, but then it was probably at a peak. Yeah, it still goes on, but it's not quite as bad. So I think that was kind of the thing. I was part of a plan of the machinations of the love side, and it didn't want that information to be out. So it's like working on a secret project, and you don't want the information to escape, because then, of course, if that escapes, then there's ways to counter that. So it's the same thing, spy versus spy that we have in the world today. You keep your information to yourself, because if it gets out that you're planning to do this or that, then the other side can figure out a way to do something that will counter that. So it was that kind of thing is kind of the idea I got. Now, what all the particulars were, I don't know. But that was kind of the core reason for it. They'd just read a secret document, or a document not for public disclosure, that sort of thing. And they took that seriously, because the struggle between the good and evil then was taken pretty seriously. So anyway, I think that's the explanation for it. The details are, who knows? Some of it may have played out, or maybe it's yet to play out. Okay. It's hard to say.
Would you say that there's this non-physical matter reality, these beings in non-physical matter reality who are just like some of the people here, working with chaos, working for the chaos side? Is there a rationale there? What brought these beings to think that chaos was the answer? And would those people those beings nudge some of the people susceptible to that in this PMR? Would they nudge them to create chaos here?
Well, the answer to that is yes, they would. The way they got that way is through a series of poor choices. And there's a psychological term that says that if you make a poor choice, what you do is you start justifying that choice because it would be painful to admit that you were wrong. So you kind of double down on your dysfunction. So that's what happens. You get de-evolution, people evolving in a negative direction. And yes, they can nudge others, but there's rules on the extent of nudging and what is allowed nudging and what is not. There's basically rules that the humans in the virtual reality, our avatars, and the consciousness that are playing them are not just pawns in a war. It's not like that. They have free will. They make their own choices, and nudging that is not forceful, nudging that is just putting an idea in somebody's head, but they can reject it because they have free will. So that sort of thing does go on.
But
Yes.
those who have a propensity to think along those lines would be easily influenced. And have those beings ever broken any of the rules?
Well, they don't break rules from the non-physical side very often. That's fairly well policed now. So they don't break rules so much. And if they do break a rule, then there's a penalty to pay for that. So that is not done so much. But yes, the people who are inclined to make bad choices, inclined toward control, power, force, then they're easier to nudge in that direction. And the positive side does the same thing. We call synchronicities when some positive thing happens. You're on your path and you just happen to bump into somebody that is exactly who you need to bump into, or you just run into a book that tells you just what you've been trying to find out. Well, those synchronicities are often nudged to people who are ready for that growth. So the nudging can be done, but nobody will ever run over your free will. You can always ignore the nudge or go for it. And sometimes you'll get a nudge and you'll look at it and you say, I don't think so. And you'll back away from it. And that's okay too. You have free will. So yes, the people who are ready to grow get nudged. And I suspect the people who are ready to de-evolve even more probably also get nudged. But there's a lot more effectiveness of the nudging on the positive side. Because the negative side is negative because they're kind of beings of chaos, then they're not very clever at making orderly plans to bring about more chaos. They tend to react emotionally. They tend to jump to conclusions because that just goes with being negative. When you're negative, you generally don't think too straight. You have a lot of emotions driving your choices. So basically, they're not very good at it, but it doesn't mean that they don't do it. They would try to do that, but they work mostly within the rules.
Okay. Do you think those beings inclined to choosing chaos, some think that you need the negative side or the dark side in order to appreciate the light, in order to counterbalance? That's not
Mhm.
necessarily true, is it?
No, that's not true at all. It's not only not necessarily true, it's just not true. You can evolve to the point where there's very little dark side, almost non-existent. You'll probably never get to the point that it's totally eliminated. If you had a society of 1 billion people and 1,000 people were still disgruntled and were looking for ways to create chaos, well, 1,000 out of 1 billion is like 1,000th of 1%. It doesn't make any difference. Whatever they can do the system can absorb that and deal with it in a way that it doesn't matter. So no, those two do not have to be balanced. Some people do think that the good and evil need to be balanced. You can't have one without the other, and that's nonsense. It doesn't work like that. I've been places that were almost wholly negative and chaotic, and I've been places that are more good than chaotic, and this is one of those places that's more good than chaotic. So no, there's no balance that has to be done, but yes, one does kind of showcase the other. You know, when you have a really bad example that really does a lot of negative stuff, then that usually is a big growth point for the positive side, because they look at that and they go, oh, that's where that leads. All right, that's a really bad idea.
On a larger scale,
Yeah,
it's something that you can see and be aware of how it hurts people and how people need to realize eventually that everyone needs love and care. And that's not, that
yeah,
is an extreme example, I guess,
yeah.
of that.
In ancient times, I shouldn't say ancient, but a long, long time ago, the I don't know what it was, theology or philosophy, I don't know what to call it, but a long time ago, they had this idea that everybody has an angel on the shoulder and a devil on that shoulder. And the little angel's telling you, no, no, don't do that bad thing, be nice, go over and help that person. And the other one saying, oh, see that person that needs help? You could grab their wallet and run off and they'd never be able to stop you. So you got the devil on one side and the angel on the other, each one trying to get your attention and whatever. So that's a metaphor of what I've just been saying. It's kind of the metaphor because people kind of saw that in themselves, that they would feel these nudges to do this or nudges to do that. And they had to exercise their free will in order to do the right thing. So as it turns out, that little metaphor was a metaphor for something that's real. Yes, there are nudges, but it's not a little angel on your shoulder or a little devil on the other shoulder. It's just that you can get nudges, and for those people who are leaders who command the attention of a lot of other people, then they're more of a target for that nudging from both sides. So that's just the way it is. It's always been that way, So it's part of life. You can get nudges to help you make choices that help you grow. And we call that synchronicity, or we call it just good luck, where you just get the right idea. You got this idea, I need to go over here to this place. And when you get there, you meet somebody that changes your life. You say, well, that was a nudge. I got this strong feeling that I needed to go there. Well, sometimes the nudges go in the opposite direction. They help somebody be more self-centered.
Is that a combination of environment and programming and experiences plus all of that, I guess, that would determine what you
Yeah, well,
choose?
what you finally do is your own free will. It determines your attitude and your feelings and what you think is right and wrong, and whether you're self-centered and you want to grab the purse and run, or whether you're not self-centered and you want to help the little lady across the street. That's just the
Yeah.
way it is. But for now, we're in this virtual reality that we're in, that we call the physical universe, and us here on planet Earth, we're doing reasonably well. We have a good opportunity to make some big steps forward in the future. We have some big lessons to learn in the meantime, but I think it's all going to wash out reasonably well. We
Okay.
just have to continue to not be part of the problem and to be part of the solution. That means stay positive, don't get angry, don't be upset, just stay positive and realize that everybody's doing, I say, the best they can, with what they've got. So you realize that and just help people to grow up if you can by giving them the space to do that. You can't force it. You can just be there in a positive way. And if everybody does that, then we will get through this rough spot, um, with flying colors. And I think we probably will eventually, but that doesn't mean that sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. Sometimes that learning, that lesson we have to learn has to hurt. For some reason, humans are not very good at learning from what? Positivity. When they're feeling positive and everything's good, they're not that interested in changing anything. Most people, if everything's working for them, they don't say, well, how could this get better? They're just happy that it's good. So they don't think too much. But when you're in pain and miserable, then you tend to think, how could this be better? What do I need to do to make the pain stop? So that's the way we are. We don't tend to act very rationally when we see something horrible coming. We look at it and say, oh, look, something horrible is coming. Let's ignore it until we feel the pain. So then we feel the pain and then we learn the lesson, then we do something about it, then we go on. That's kind of typically the way humans have been working.
You've mentioned before that the the LCS, the larger consciousness system, has an interest in maintaining the low entropy of the system. At what point does the chaos interfere with that to the point where it needs to be stopped in order to do less damage to its own progress,
The
evolution?
LCS does not step in and move pieces around. It doesn't step in and force people to do things that it's not their free will. Make this person nice who's naughty and make this person uh, make better choices than they would make on their own. You have to let the individual units of consciousness make free will choices. So never does the LCS come in and say, well, I'm going to fix this. Now, if they had a situation that was not a situation caused by individuated units of consciousness, but one that was, say, just rule set. Let's say the Earth was about to be hit by a big comet, and when it did, it would disintegrate the Earth and everybody dies. 100%. Not only people, but dogs and cats and horses and trees and bushes. Nothing left alive at all. So if that was going to happen, then the larger conscious system could correct that because it would know that was the way the rule set was working. And that was just the statistical, the probabilistic thing that could happen. And then it would see that happening. And before anybody had any idea there was even a possibility, the larger conscious system could just delete that comet. After all, it's a virtual comet because this is a virtual reality. So in that case, yes, it could step in and do something, but that's not overriding anybody's free will. It's not creating any kind of an impact on the way the conscious entities that are playing avatars would think or do. Nobody on this planet would ever have a clue that that was about to happen. It would just be taken care of. So in that case, the system can step in to avert things like that in a way that nobody notices. And that's all right. And I suspect it will do that. But if we, the consciousness that are playing the humans in this game, if we decide to go negative, then that's our choice. And we can just go as negative as we have to. And then eventually, when it gets so awful and so terrible that even the bad guys can't stand it, then it starts going back the other way. And then evolution starts chugging in a positive direction again. And the people who've just been through all that terribleness are very aware of not repeating that again. Once they get just a little bit of light in their life, they are very sensitive to that negativity. So then they tend to grow even faster because they've learned a lesson from the negative side. So evolution is slow, but it's relentless. It just keeps going. So even if you take steps to go backwards, you will eventually turn around and go forward
Well, we do have a lot of
again.
history
So,
of things to look at and things that we thought would never happen
mhm,
again. And yet that cycle gets repeated and history gets ignored.
sure.
I'm curious if those non-physical matter reality beings that are on the side of chaos, how is that handled? And have they been around for a very long time? And how long can you go on with that negativity as a goal?
Well, you can go on with that negativity until you change your mind and start evolving in the other direction. It's a personal choice. It's free will. So free will is pretty much a sacred thing in the system. You don't override free will. This is a schoolhouse. You know, the kids are supposed to learn by interacting with each other. You can't say, well, here's the way you're supposed to be, so I'll just make you be that way. Well, that isn't them growing up. That's somebody else forcing them to do something other than what they would choose. That isn't helpful. That doesn't lower entropy. That doesn't make the system any better. You might think it does. Oh, you make all the bad guys behave and be nice. Well, that would make it better, but it doesn't make it better because you haven't lowered the entropy of the system. It looks better and it might feel better, but as far as the evolving consciousness system, it's not any better. You've just thrown the dirt under the rug where you can't see it. That doesn't make the house cleaner. It just rearranges where the dirt is. So they have to turn around of their own free will, and eventually they do. Like I say, it's an extremely rare case where something would be so dysfunctional that it seems that the probability of it turning around goes almost to zero. Okay, in that case, I can see the system would delete that entity and that would free up some bits for other things. So that's all computers do that. We go through and we empty the trash every once in a while. But this particular consciousness system wouldn't do that unless there was virtually no other choice, because its philosophy, the way it works, is that things keep making choices until they see the error of their ways, and then they change. They start turning around and being positive. And sometimes that takes a long time, and most of the time it doesn't take that long. They realize because there's consequences for the negativity. And even though they may feel like they love chaos, they're still miserable, unhappy. And it almost always will happen that they will eventually figure out they're on the wrong path, and they'll turn around and start going the other way. And then, like I say, they'll go toward the positive direction more quickly because they have a lot of memory about what doesn't work, and they can avoid that. So the system is a very benevolent system. It is. So it works with everybody, even those people who have done things that weren't very nice. And what it does with those people is the next evolution, the next time, it gives them an easier experience. Their next experience packet is one where it's actually hard to fail. They don't have there's very few incentives.
That's
most of their
interesting because
choices.
that's counter to what people would think. But
Yes.
if they've been abused from a young
Yeah.
age and they know
Yeah.
no other way, then
Yeah.
perhaps being
Yeah.
benevolent and
Well,
allowing them an easier way is the way to
yeah,
go.
you give them something easier so that they will succeed. And then when they succeed, that gives them a lot more probability they'll succeed the next time.
Yeah.
So you slowly rehabilitate people by helping them to see a better way. That's the way the system works. It's like the father who puts the basket in the basketball, for his 8-year-olds, he puts it down to about a 6-foot level rather than the normal level, because at the normal level, they're not strong enough to throw a basketball that high. So you put it down to where they can succeed. And then when they get a little older and stronger, you move it up 6 inches and let them play with that. And then move it up another till you eventually, when they're big enough and strong enough to play the game, then they can play it at the height that's meant for the game. But you make things easier so that they can succeed, because that builds confidence and that helps them succeed more. Whereas if you start that basket at the height for adults, and your 8-year-olds, you tell your 8-year-olds go out and play basketball. Well, they get frustrated. They'll quit because they can't do it, or they can't do it very well, and it's more frustrating than it is fun. So
That's an
those are,
interesting analogy, a
those
good
are the
one.
things you do. You have to help people as they have a capability and an ability to make good choices or to make baskets. You have to lower the bar to the point that they can succeed. And when they succeed, that makes them feel good about themselves, which makes them try harder. And eventually, as they need more challenges, you keep raising the bar, of expectation and where they can function. So the system works like that. So the rehabilitation of entities that are making poor choices works almost all of the time. But there are possibilities that, the negativity continues for a long time. And some of these entities that probably are most troublesome are entities that don't come here in this school. So if they're not in the schoolhouse, then it's a little harder to help them out. You see, so these are entities who have always been in what we call, the non-physical. And that makes them a little more difficult to work with because giving them an easier time is a hard thing to do if they're not in school. If they're in school, well, you can arrange lessons that aren't quite so hard for them. But if they're non-physical, then that's a little more difficult. But anyway, that's some of what goes on. So people don't worry about being deleted. That is a very, very, very unlikely thing that would ever happen. And that if it has ever happened, I'm just saying it's a possibility. I don't know that it's ever happened, but it's a possibility. And anybody who runs an information system eventually knows that there's trash that has to be taken out. There's functions that are no longer working, are no longer needed. So you don't have to have those around anymore. But in this system, I don't think that's hardly ever IUOCs. They're almost always redeemable. Almost always can they be brought back to a positive way. The system is a very benevolent system that wants everybody to succeed. Now, I don't know that everybody will ever do that. There's always going to be some people in the margins that are negative.
Well, is it true, Tom, that you helped a negative entity to the light side? Is it true that you assisted?
I have done that.
And how has that entity progressed?
Well, I checked in once, and all this happened a long, long time ago. And I checked in once or twice, and they were doing just fine, marvelously.
Nice. Yeah.
That's when I actually learned that if you've been to the negative side, you're a faster grower on the positive side because you already know what the wrong answer is.
Right. What you say from experience, you've observed all of these things. That's the interesting thing. Well, it boils down to when people say, how can we do something and how do we make a better world? It all boils down to choices, your own choices. Make your best choice. And that's what you can do. And that's what propels us forward.
Exactly. Be positive, be part of the solution. If you see the evil and what you want to do is go bludgeon it with a stick, now you're part of the problem. That's not going to help the evil grow up. That's just going to make it more evil. It's going to make it double down on its chaos and on the damage it can do. So just be positive, be happy, smile, laugh, enjoy your life as best you can. Don't worry about where the big picture is going. That's way above your ability to do anything about it. And worrying and being upset about the things you can't control is not useful. So do what you can control, which is yourself, your own attitudes and your own feelings, and make those positive. Always be positive.
Make some good choices for those who can't.
Make the best choices you can. But the way to the way to turn the negative side around isn't to beat them or to kill them or to force them or to put them all in jail or to murder them all. That's not the right answer. We're talking about lowering the entropy of the system. We need them to see that what they're doing is chaotic, and we can't do that by lecturing them. That doesn't work. It just makes them dig in deeper. So yes, there's no direct way to go change them. You can't just get them and shake them out like shaking the dirt out of a rug. It doesn't work that way. They have to make the choices to do better, to move in the opposite direction. And usually the way you can help that process is by being kind, is by giving them the space to see a bigger picture, not by pressing them and telling them how wrong they are. That goes the wrong way. So by being positive, by being caring, cooperative, and having a positive attitude, having fun, smiling, laughing, enjoy your life. Don't let somebody else's negativity ruin your life. You're in charge of your life. And that's the old thing about, oh, George makes me unhappy. No, George doesn't make you unhappy. No matter what George is doing, you choose to be unhappy because what George is doing. Well, stop choosing to be unhappy. You see, that's the key thing. And the system will take care of itself. And just because you say, well, I think the system's going to hell in a handbag, it's just disintegrating. Well, that's a very, very small view. You don't have the big picture. There are bigger pictures, and then there are bigger pictures than that, and bigger pictures than that.
Yeah.
And you don't have the big picture. So just let it be. There are forces that you don't control, both here and in the non-physical. And you just have to say it'll be what it is. I'll do my part. And that's as much as you can do. Just do your part. Be kind, be caring. Don't get negative. Don't get angry. Just be the best that you can be. Make the best choices that you can make that helps everyone. And eventually, those with bad attitudes will see the wisdom in having a good attitude, and there'll be fewer and fewer and fewer of a percentage that are choosing to de-evolve until that gets to such a small percentage that it doesn't even matter anymore. So that's where we're headed, and we will get there sooner or later. Whether it takes another millennia, another 1,000 years before we get there, because we've got some backing up to do first or not, who knows? These are things you cannot know. So don't try to guess what the big picture is going to be. Just let it be whatever it is and make sure that you're positive in doing your part to help, and doing that in a very positive way, with no negativity, without anger, without being upset, without creating stress for yourself or anybody else. So that's the way to approach these things.
Well,
The
thank you for
picture's
that
bigger than you
discussion.
can imagine. So just let it fall out however it falls out and deal with it. Right? What happens is something that just happens, and our job is not to manipulate what happens. Our job is to deal with it in the most positive way. Now that means I'm not trying to say it's just Pollyanna, just go, dance and smile and forget about the world. No, you should be aware of what's going on, and you should be trying to be as positive as possible in the places where that positivity will do the most good. You need to try to educate. You need to try to discuss, but you need to, if you disagree with somebody's viewpoints, you need to be able to have a discussion with them, not an argument with them, but a discussion with them. An argument will just harden both sides. A discussion may actually, shed some light on one side or the other. So if you can interact, educate, learn, discuss, share, connect, that's all good. No, just don't sit on the sidelines grinning. That's not what I mean. You have to be involved. You have to be aware. You need to be connected, but just do that with positiveness. That's the idea.
Thank you for this discussion, Tom. And remember, just make good choices.
That's it.
Okay, thanks. Would you like to see a better world? Get a better perspective. Balance your intellect with intuition and explore your true nature with the Exploring Consciousness and Everything Paranormal program with Thomas Campbell. In this program, you will have the benefit of Tom's vast experience and learn to access point consciousness, communicate with the larger consciousness system, remote view, use your natural ability to heal with intent, and explore reality in the out-of-body state. His famous binaural beats are included. Details are in the description below. Thank you.
I and MBT Events hope you like this video. If you do, then you should consider being a Patreon member, because Patreon members get early access to our special content. You will also be able to get your questions answered by me in special Q&A sessions, and most importantly, your contribution as a patron member will enable us to produce the content that you're looking for. So thank you.